Good afternoon. You're welcome to the faculty. The faculty is a public affairs program on Delta Broadcasting Service Television every weekday. Today's faculty is quite instructive, informative, and very important for the everyday life of Nigeria and Nigerians. Globally, there's been an impact and the fallout from the Iran and the United States/Israeli war ongoing in the Middle East. We've had couples of ceasefires, but then agreements have not been kept. There've been a lot of intimidation from both sides, and it's beginning to look like a Gulf war is setting in place. Iran has always taken the retaliatory effect of attacking every United States base in the Middle East anytime the United States attacks any of its facilities or citizens or cities. Moving forward, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, you name it, United Arab Emirates have been victims of Iranian retaliation of United States bases within their territory. Iran has sent out a warning to all countries bordering itself that anyone that is so connected to the United States would face retaliation concerns emanating from actions or inactions of the United States Trump government. Moving forward, we're going to be looking exceedingly and exclusively on issues that are arising from the impact of the Middle East war. Fuel crisis, the Strait of Hormuz, the lack of international negotiations, and of course, international, talking about politics, oil, buying and selling of oil, and so many other issues arising, emanating from the war in the Middle East. I call it the war in the Middle East. Yes. To do justice to that with me in the studio is Comrade Chika Omoso. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you, viewers, for having me today.
It's been a very, very tough couple of months globally, and especially on the world economy, and of course, not forgetting the impact it has, the ripple effect for smaller nations that are not directly involved with the war. Can you give us an expose of what triggered the war and your overview of the war in question?
Yeah, we live in interconnected economy, so what happens in one nation is likely to affect the other nation. But again, what happens in another nation because of what is happening in other places, it's an indication of how sovereign that nation is. You know, because before coming to the studio, I was trying to look at the effect of the war between US and Iran, especially with regards to the effect it has on pump price. And I discovered that before the war, a gallon of fuel in the US was $3-point-something, and because of the war, it went up to $4.09 with an increment of about $1. And I checked for Iran as well, and I discovered that Iran is, their fuel pump price there is greatly subsidized. And so it's even less than $0.1 because the price is about $0.03. But coming down to our nation, because I want to take everything down to our nation, you see pump price rising every day in hundreds of naira, not even in, we will analyze much more, hundreds of naira. And when you talk, they say no because of the problem happening between US and Iran. The question I've always asked, why is it that whatever happens in other nations tend to affect us, and it affects us negatively? Some countries are benefiting from this war in US and Iran, either because they are making more exports to those countries, or one of those things, but in our own nation we give excuses. So I decided to look at what a worker receives in US and what a worker receives in Nigeria. Sometimes when you talk about this thing, they say, for example, if you say a liter of fuel in US is $1.0, someone will say, okay, let's put it in naira. That's about 1,800, let's just say 2,000 naira. It makes sense. When it comes to Iran, it's just $0.03. When it comes to Nigeria, it's going between 1,000. See, ours now is in thousands. 1,200 1,250 to 1,300 naira. So I decided to look at the basic salary of a U.S. worker. It's between $2,500 to $2,800 per month. That will give you about $40,000 to $60,000 per year, per annum. So a U.S. worker basically goes home with about, let's say, 65 to 70 million naira per annum. But a Nigerian worker who is buying fuel in thousands, it's going home with about, because his basic salary is between 120 to 130 thousand naira for a graduate. Of course, basic salary is 70,000 naira. So he goes home with about 1.3 or 1.4 million naira per annum. You see, there's a big gap. Meanwhile, an average Nigerian is struggling with light every day. He spends, if he's to spend even 3,000 naira to say he buys 2 liters every day, how much can that salary take him? If you divide that by 70,000 naira, he will only be able to even afford the fuel for about 24 days. But an average US citizen is not buying fuel to carry his home. There's basic light. There are basic things. There are social welfare packages for your children. You know, you don't even have to struggle for the school fees. Because, you know, I'm making this analysis for some of us who will say $1.09 is equivalent to what we are paying in naira. But it's not true, because if you check what the man in US is receiving as basic salary, it's nothing to compare. Okay, why is a Nigerian not receiving up to even 20 million naira per annum after working for the government from Monday to Saturday? Sometimes, okay, let's just say Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And you know, so the analysis is
12 million. You are not
the disparity is just too much.
You've not talked of 12 million.
And when I was checking the analysis, you see, US is a good producer of oil. They are producing well, just like Iran. But when it comes to Nigeria, they said Nigeria, despite being a major producer of oil, imports most of its oil products. So you see, ours is a different ball game.
Now let's look.
Our country looks like we don't have a government.
Now let's look at the impact. Let's before we relate it to Nigeria. Now, I mean, a major trading route for the oil vessels is the
Strait of Hormuz.
Now, how significant is the Strait of Hormuz? I mean, a lot of us grew up to know that 3/4 of the earth is covered by water, and there should be other options of moving cargo ships and commercial ships on water to designated countries, from buyer countries to seller countries. So what is the significance of this? And Iran seems to be monopolizing the Strait of Hormuz to control the war. This war, I think Iran is controlling the war. They would decide when the war would end, not the Americans, because ceasefire has happened a couple of times, but then there's never been any concrete ceasefire.
You see, war is diplomacy carried out in another form, in another way. When diplomacy is not working, we tend to go into war. But again, what is happening now tells you that the best form of solving a problem is through diplomatic means, which is engaging you and I coming to the table to discuss, not really carrying the fights, because US seem to be the world power, and they seem to want to control the person who owns the oil that is helping the world. So they tend to want to threaten Iran. Listen, Iran is a powerful country on its own, in its own right. And US is yet to understand that fact. It's like an adult who thinks he knows it all because he's huge, he's tall, he's big, he's old. And then a young man who is growing up, he knows where he's going to punch you now as an old man, and you get hurt. But US is not listening to that. However, the effect is that as a sovereign nation and as a nation, as it were, you should have control of your resources. That is what Nigerians don't have. That's why whatever happens outside affects us. If South African and Nigerians are fighting in South Africa, it affects us in Nigeria. If Iran and US is having war, it affects us. If Ukraine and Russia is fighting, it affects us. Because we don't have control of our resources, our economy specifically. But Iran is in control of its oil.
Yes.
The territorial integrity of Iran is actually well protected.
Exactly.
And so, because we live in an interconnected economy, they want to control how this product leaves their country. And so they are controlling that. Even there is a part I noticed that US also controls a large number of the waters. There's something I saw that they built a security along that place. You can't pass unless they give you access.
Yes.
That's also what Iran has done to their waters. You can't move this product unless we say so, unless you have met the criteria. It's not like this one was struggling in Nigeria and we're talking about piracy, disturbing our stuff, our oil well, there's bunkering here. No, it doesn't happen in civilized climes. You know, where things are controlled. You can't just go and get an oil well and you get away with it. The only people who can do this is what US is trying to do, trying to control the economy of another nation. Exactly. But God has made this world that we will depend on each other. No matter the resources at your disposal, we're going to need Mr. A, we're going to need Mr. B is going to need Mr. A, Mr. A is going to need Mr. B. Therefore, we must always come to the negotiation table. And that's where where diplomacy comes to play. We must have diplomatic envoys who are going to sit down with nations and say, you know what, we need you here, you need us here. We come to a convergence, we have an agreement. It's not fight. This fight has not helped either the US or the Iran.
Now let's look at the implications of this war between the United States, Israel. You say, okay, before I go there, we've been looking at just the US and Iran. We've not talked about the role of Israel as a country in the Middle East war. I call it the Middle East war. What is the role of Israel? Because this is a lot, when the war started, a lot of postulations was directed towards the influence, the hand of Jacob and the voice of Esau, the voice of Jacob and the hand of Esau, that Americans are fighting this war on behalf of the Israelis. And I stand to be corrected. What's your opinion?
Yes, that's not exactly true. What you're saying is trying to make it look like US has no interest in the war they are fighting. They are pushed by Israel to do what they are doing. No, there's a lot of troubles happening between Iran and US. And it's also connected to terrorism.
Yes.
Because Ab initio is believed that Iran, with enormous oil resources and enormous funds, they are able to help these terrorist groups across continents, not even countries, within their continents. And US is trying to curtail that power of Iran. Remember, US and Iran has been on cat and rat race,
for decades,
tug of war for a long time. And he just taking the boldness of Mr. Trump to hit Iran at this point in time, starting by killing their supreme leader, because he wants to show might. And in the world of men, it's also important at times to show might, because too much talk has led us here, even as a nation in Nigeria. Things were not as bad as it is in this time, in this country, during even the military era. Now we have representatives who are talking much and doing less. And US president is saying, we have talked too long on this matter. We have debated too long on this matter. We have had a lot of diplomacy on this matter. This negotiation is not working. We'll take the negotiation to another level. And so we will hit you. Let's start talking from there. By the time you see our might, perhaps you're going to adjust in how you're going to react to the things we have brought on the table. The truth of the matter is that since September 11, US is not going to sit back and watch crime, criminality,
exactly, yeah,
terrorism grow in another country. Because sometimes these people groom themselves in another country to attack US.
Yes.
So US has made a law from the time of Bush that they are not ever going to sit back and watch any group rise. Like the ISIS is now rising. We're not talking of Al-Qaeda anymore. We're talking of ISIS. We're talking of banditry. We're talking of Iceman. Even in our country right now, to the extent that they are now trying to help our government, because if they touch one, they have touched all. Yeah. And you cannot say we have an interconnected economy if you are not also talking about interconnected security. The truth is that if there's a breach of security in one country, it's going to seep to another country, and you don't know the form they're going to take. So the best is, if you are world power and you are the world watchdog, you are supposed, and you should watch the world carefully. And that's what US is doing. Okay. A lot of people may have problem with Mr. Trump, yes. But for goodness sake, I do not agree that a man should have power and not use it, and use it correctly.
That's quite a nice one. Like I did say, if you're just joining us, you're live on Delta Broadcasting Service Television, and of course, it's the Parliament, a public affairs program held every weekday. Well, I'm looking critically at the U.S.-Iran war, inclusive U.S., Iran, and the Israeli war, calling it the war of the Middle East. We're looking at the implications, the complications, the nitty-gritty, and of course, the players in this act. Now, let's look critically at Iranian response to some of U.S. complicity and bombings in the Iranian territory. We found that the Iranians is responding by, Iran has bombed Kuwait, they have bombed Bahrain, they have bombed UAE, they have bombed other Gulf countries within the Gulf region. Is that a good sign for the Gulf region? Is that not a sign of implosive escalation of the crisis? And why should Iran choose to? Their justification was any country that has a U.S. base. Is it not the sovereignty of that country, the decision of that country to have a U.S. base? Is it not the country's sovereignty that has been threatened by the Iranians taking the war too far, trying to using other countries as a collateral for protecting its own sovereignty? So what's your take in that?
That's a good principle of fighting. There's this animal that fights the eagle. It goes on the back of the eagle and he perches there, is knocking the eagle on the head. And the eagle does not fight it. What the eagle does is to fly very high, to an high altitude, where that crook, I think the animal is called crook, it can no longer breathe. And it falls off the eagle's hand, the eagle's head, and to the ground and dies. That's how the eagle chooses to fight. US can bomb Iran, but it behoves on Iran to do the needful. However, it appears Iran cannot bomb US. So whatever is connected to US that they can reach, they attack it. Because we have the head, we have the arms, we have our eyes. All of them are essential part of our bodies. So if I cannot attack your head and I can get close to your arm, your eyes, your ears, I should be able to do that. That is the tactics Iran is using. And like I said, war is diplomacy carried out in another form. By the time Iran succeeds in attacking these nations, those nations will react in a way, either by attacking Iran back or attacking US by saying you are the cause of the attack we are getting from Iran. And by the way, this nation can't stand Iran. So they will be telling their allies, the US, to kind of pipe low. And that is the tactics Iran is using. And I do not see it as a wrong method. It is what they can reach.
Exactly.
The countries they can afford to attack, that's what they are doing, because they want to get the attention of the US. And these countries are essential components of the body of US. So US wouldn't want to see this happening because they are their allies and they are supposed to protect them, and they are not protecting them. Therefore, what they are gaining from this country might cease. Exactly. And that is the tactics or the method Iran is trying to use. And it's a good one because let's forget the fact that US is fighting for the whole world. We are saying they are fighting a nation, and this is the only way the nation will call the attention of the world to tell the US to adjust. its method. And let's
That
sit down
is
on the
invariably
table.
you're talking about
Because it's a big insult to come to my
yes,
country and kill my leader.
My leader, that's the height.
And begin to
that
dictate how diplomacy should
that
go.
is where I was going to. Was Donald Trump right to have infiltrated the sovereignty of the Iranian government and killed the very senior citizens of Iran? And the international community, United Nations, have not made any pronouncement to that or its culpability, especially with reference to the UN Charter on Human Rights.
You know, sometimes things will happen so that we understand the language we're using. Some years ago, the U.S. described the UN as a social club. And indeed, if it's not a social club, they would have been able to call some world powers to order. Because the UN is actually supposed to galvanize this world power, see how they take action. They even have a security apparatus. But you see, the way the UN is structured is that we the world power, all have veto powers.
Yes,
we can veto whatever has been decided at the Security Council. Yeah. You know, so they can decide and US says no, and nothing happens to US. Israel says no, nothing happens. Germany says no, nothing happens. China says no, nothing happens. So invariably it's a social club. If the body does not have an authority to sanction a nation that vetoes its agreement and does what it likes, then why are we meeting?
Exactly.
You know, so again, the question you asked is, if they have the power to infiltrate, well, in the world of man, there is a place, power has its place to speak when the words are not enough.
Let's look, okay.
Iran is saying that you can't touch us. US is saying, see, we are beyond your walls. We can infiltrate you. We can even get as far as killing your supreme leader, whom the whole nation is protecting. So whatever you think, you better listen to us. In fact, US sent that as there's a language of power to tell you that we can come in here and do wonders to you. You better listen to us. And Iran is saying, well, we may not be able to cut off your head, but we can attack your hand. We can, if you do this nonsense, or I want to put it that way, because we are all angry now. If you do what you're saying, we are going to cut off your hand, cut off your leg, and then you'll be left with your head. But US is saying, no, we will protect ourselves. So if it's right or wrong, I don't want to adjudge. It's based on the agreement they want to reach. We are looking for world peace. US is looking for world peace. And they don't want to have anybody who will have power to nuclear, right to nuclear powers.
Talking about the world peace, you're leading me to my next question. You're talking about the world peace. We have seen the reasons the United States is fighting Iran and the reaction of Iran. The reasons are more embedded in the fact that the Iranians are so much inclined in the procurement, manufacture, procurement, and usage, storage of nuclear weapons. And it's not far-fetched from the fact that the Iranians are already using these nuclear weapons to retaliate on other countries in the Gulf, especially anytime the United States breaches agreement and then there's an attack. They react with drone-guided nuclear powers. How realistic is that for the possibility of the Iranians being checkmated? Because they seem to have real stockpiles of nuclear powers, even without the ones that technology cannot really trace. How do we curtail these Iran excesses?
Well, the US is very intelligent. We must give it to them. I do not agree that they have pies that cannot be traced. Otherwise, some of this bombing, the bombing, the destruction that happened in Iran, they never saw it coming. Because some of these stockpiles were down deep the ground, and they thought no bombs can penetrate. But US is telling you, see, we have eyes. We have 7 eyes. You have 2, or probably 1 extra, 3, but we have 7. We see beyond you, and we can reach any length and to do any destructions we want to do. And they are so powerful and so clever and so I don't know. The U.S. is a wizard in its ride, because they can come and destroy. You only know they have come when they have gone.
After the destruction, after when they have gone.
They've gone and they've done the damages. So it's good for us to have. And why we trust the U.S. is that it's not a country that is not guided. Even what the Trump administration is doing in their language is excessive. You know, so, and then there's an extent to which he does that. No other country in the world is as organized as the U.S. And I want to agree to the fact that they're looking for world peace. Because if every country has nuclear powers, it will be terrible. This world will not be conducive for any of us to live. Remember, there's a lot of destructions that happen even to the climate, to the ozone layer, with the exploration of some of these nuclear gadgets. So the danger is not that we even use it against a country. The exploration is already causing enough damage to the ozone layer, and some people don't believe in climate change. They say it's a lie. It's just one of those things. But Iran has not only used it; it has used it to also threaten. The level of threat by Iran with nuclear weapon is even more than the time he has used it, and that threat enough is a crime for us to have world peace. It means that I cannot say what I want to say because you could use nuclear weapons to attack me. And that's what U.S. is saying. Everybody has to have freedom of association, to be able to express themselves, to be able to negotiate without undue influence. However, this undue influence is what U.S. is trying to use now.
Now let's look at the implications.
But they have a right to do that
on the economy of Nigeria. The war has really taken a great toll on the economy of Nigeria, and I'm going to reel out these. Prior post-attack from the United States on Iran, we saw an upsurge in the price of oil, and immediately it reflected in the price of oil in another associated products in Nigeria. They didn't wait. The marketers, the refineries, were seeing monopolies. The price surged from between 750 naira to 850 naira to between 750 to 800. So between 1,250 to 1,350. How do you relate that price surge initially? Then, second question is this. In the past couple of months, or rather weeks, we have seen cases of, meetings, international diplomacy, like you said, being chaired by different countries, the Pakistan diplomats sharing meetings between the delegates from the United States and delegates from Iran. But then, in the course of some of these deliberations, the war still continued. Even when the price came down, it was so difficult for the average fueling station in Nigeria to adjust, in quote, adjust its price back to between 750 and 850. But then, last week, there was another upsurge in the war, and the price had to reflect. They said Dangote added 100 naira, and immediately, all the filling stations, why does it, summarizing all this, then I ask the final question, why is it so easy for fuel dispensers or marketers in Nigeria to increase the price, but they find it difficult when the market forces of demand and supply adjust the meter back? At this time, they have not gone to buy new stock. Understand that. Adjust the meter back to the status quo.
It is unlawful to be lawful in an unlawful nation. I think this statement is accredited to Awolowo. We are a nation a lawless nation. Nobody's watching over anybody. It's like the feudal system, where the owners of land and means of production now decide whatever it is. We are saying that market forces should determine the prices of oil, but it doesn't. It's owners of filling stations, not even oil wells, that decide what the price will be. And nobody is watching anybody. Nobody is penalizing anybody. We no longer have task force. Our leaders, after coming to power, don't want to use power to do what power should be used for. They use it to do campaign for another election, for re-election. As we speak currently in our nation, I do not think that any of the administration is serious about watching market prices, ensuring that marketers are not selling the way they like, whether the forces of demand and supply is actually having its role. You know, because you see, even in US, a capitalist system like ours, there are control measures that government must put in place. Otherwise, owners of means of production, every businessman wants to make inordinate profit.
So
that's why if we have already pump, we have petrol in our station right now, and we hear that there's an increment, we could raise it
immediately.
But when there is a downfall, we cannot raise it. We are waiting for us to finish this product when we buy again. And we have an economy that is not stable. Before they finish that product to go and buy again, maybe something will happen. And so we just remain where we are, or we even go up. But I'm saying that if we have a nation where people are controlled, where we fear the arms of government, the institutions of government, we know that we cannot do more than this. This will be and that's why in some countries and in some products, even in Nigeria, you see the producers putting the price, what the price should be.
Yeah.
So that's what a country does. You fix it. You can fix maximum price. And then minimum price can take its course, you understand. But it cannot go above certain level. If it goes above certain level, government will come.
That means you invariably, you and I right now, we're indicting the government, because the government has not been seen to be playing its role of regulating.
No regulation. There is no country where you don't have regulation. You must regulate, even as power sector is involved. You must regulate. Otherwise, this power, they are ready to charge you even 1,000 naira per unit. So government cannot take away its role in regulating businesses. Yeah. No matter how you want to say it, no matter whether it's capitalist, socialist, government must, if you don't regulate. In Edo State, close to us here, when Oshomole was the governor, he made a serious warning to landlords, that if a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom apartment should be so amount. If you do it more than so amount, I will come with my own taxes. And even when you collect this money, because there's an extent you landlord can collect, can fix it. If you collect this money, I will come with my taxes and I will take away those money. Therefore, to avert my wrath, you will leave the rate of a house rent at so level. That's how you influence things. Because what the landlords do, for example, in this part of the country, is that you look at people who have free money to spend. I don't want to adjudge whatever they do to get money. And then you use it to fix prices. But you do not check that most of the people here are civil servants. If somebody is receiving 125,000 naira a month, and you are asking him to take away 30,000 naira for, which is more than though, or 50,000 naira for house rent every month. So how is he going to survive? How do you want that civil servant to do his work well in the office without looking for ways to steal and all of that? So, I'm saying that government has to regulate. We're not regulating enough. We're not concerned. Okay. Even the House of Assembly and the National Assembly should have made a law to control how things happen in this country, because they are the one who is determining the salary of workers in Nigeria. They know what an average worker is receiving in Nigeria. And if you don't regulate house rent, you don't regulate petrol, you don't regulate it, regulating is different from a subsidy.
Yes, it's different.
If you don't regulate some of all these things, now you sit back and check. An average worker, how can he survive in this country? If we don't regulate, that means this person should look for other means of income, or should steal, if it's possible. But none of them is doing that. How many laws do we have now that regulate how house rent should be in this country or in this state? We don't have. What are the honorables doing? So you see, I don't know.
Quite unfortunate.
The center no longer holds.
It
no longer holds because the people who are brought in to lead us, to help us, to organize the state, are organizing themselves and their families.
Like I've always said,
at the state.
And besides all that, like I've always said on most of our programs, I said we extort from the poor to feed the lifestyle of the rich, and that's what is definitely happened with most of the things that we're seeing right now. But still, talking about the war in the Middle East. Let's look at the non-implications, or rather the non-commitment of nations, the NATO nations, the European Union, and the silence of the United Nations. And of course, the African Union has not made any pronouncement, maybe, but then economies in Africa are weeping from the effects of the war in Iran and the implications of the closure, opening, opening of the Strait of Hormuz, a natural route for international businesses. So why the silence on this? Is it because the godfather, the American, the policeman of the world is directly involved? Are they scared of the route or the route of the American government? Are they trying to maintain a neutrality? Because Iran has mentioned that anywhere you are, if you support American interests, we can send missiles to you, so everybody's quiet. Why?
Well, it is difficult and foolish to play on the international league when you've not even played your local leagues well. You know, you don't want to get involved in world affair when you can't even control your nation. So what will you find, what will you talk about, for example, our president to begin to meddle with what is happening at the world affair when he cannot control his nation? When bandits are disturbing, when the next election we're not sure that we're going to have elections in certain areas in this country because bandits have taken over, and you have your military, you're the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, but they are killing your military. In fact, we are recording more deaths on the military side than on the bandits and the terrorist side.
Yeah.
They are laying ambush for us, and we're not laying ambush for them. So would it not be funny for him to get involved in world affairs when he has not solved his local affair? Then secondly, you talked about threat. It's not really about the threat. The African nations have more problems. They have enormous tasks on their hands that they've not been able to settle, that they don't want to get involved with international affairs. Because look at what is happening in Nigeria and South Africa. You know, even the president of South Africa can't control its people. Yeah, exactly. And you're killing Nigerians that helped you in apartheid. If you want to chase Nigerians out, must we kill them? But there are ways to do this. There are diplomatic means to get things done. So you see, African leaders are lucky leaders. Most of them were not prepared. They came from a good home, a good background, and they were meant to play the politics. I'm not saying smart. They were meant to play the politics, and they got to power, and they are misusing power. And that is what even the U.S. is also trying to control. Yes. Because the supreme leader in Iran we'll talk about today, there was a time where Iran was evolving. You know, it was trying to make its nation more liberal. Yeah. But some group of people felt that no, the more liberal we become, the more these guys will come in and begin to dictate to us. Let's keep our tradition. Let's hold ourselves strong in this manner. But it has not augured well with other nations of the world. In fact, with neighbors of Iran. And even citizens of Iran. Because the part they are not telling you is that people are happy with what is happening. For example, I was in a course outside of this country where they announced that another country has been taken over by military coup. And students who preach democracy, who want democracy, who have been angry with military rule were rejoicing. They were rejoicing because our democracy has not served us.
Yes.
And the military seem to be doing well. They call the shots, and you see the answers. You know where they are going. In this democracy, you find people talking and doing nothing. Exactly. You see people who are supposed to be oversight to the government of the day singing their mandate. And even within themselves, they are fighting. They are not standing for the truth. Look at our legislative arm, National House of Assembly, where you have invited somebody for more than 9 times, and he doesn't come and you do nothing. Because you are a beneficiary of the corruption. But the military, unless the head is corrupt, everybody will sit up. Exactly. So once the man's head up there is right, everybody sits up. But in democracy, your head may be right, But those around you, because we're surrounded by sycophants, well, the way we are raised, we like people who praise us than people who tell you that, oh, your teeth is smelling, you need to go brush your mouth. You know, so we are surrounded by sycophants, and those around you seem to be telling you something different. And because most of our leaders in Africa, they are old. They are old and sickly. So they are not able to do the work they're supposed to do, the overnight work.
Their mindset is analog. I mean, if you look at the
so it's just where they want to go. That's why someone will take you back to your own National Assembly. It's not what the nation is looking for. I'm not saying that thank you, national anthem, because
I didn't see the relevance.
It is where he's coming from. They believe in what they believe. Someone was writing a book on. He told me of an article he wrote about tradition and modernity, and it's from a royal family. And I said, that's an attack on the system. He said, yes, because he has seen that a lot of things have changed over time. Modernity is coming, so we need to evolve. But somebody who takes you back to 1960, he doesn't take our economy back to 1960, where our money was bigger than dollars and competing with pounds. He did not take us back there. He's to give us new national anthem, and we are where we are. I'm just saying. I'm not saying he hasn't done well in some other places.
Exactly.
I'm not here to condemn government. I'm just using that to cite an example of where we are coming from. That our leaders in Africa, first, some of them were not prepared. A lot of them were not prepared. A lot of them are old and sickly. A lot of them are analog. They do not understand that the world is changing. We are evolving, and we have to, apply new methods to achieve new goals.
Just rounding up, one last word for our listeners in relation to the war in the Middle East before we round up. One last word. What will you, to Nigerians, especially the implications of that war in the economy of our nation, especially in the
Nigerians, I want us to build a nation that things happening in the international market doesn't affect us badly and so easily. It will take a long time. Let's have a nation that is sovereign indeed. That's how we build. That's how we grow. The nations that are fighting this war, they are better off with fuel than us, who are recipients. We have fuel, we are importing fuel because they refine for us and they bring it to this nation. See, the worst form of slavery is when you're at the level when you see something bad and you can't call it bad. So Nigerians, we must wake up. 2027 is by the corner. Don't take it for granted. I'm not to tell you who to vote for, but I am telling you we have to make a decision to make this country great again.
All right, emancipating ourselves from mental slavery. That's the closing remark of our panelists here today. It's been a very, very educative and informative faculty we've had here this wonderful afternoon. And I must appreciate everyone that is tuned in, listening to us. I must thank our guest here, Comrade Chika. Also, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
And of course, to everyone that's been part of this program, I want to say a very wonderful afternoon. Remain blessed. My name remains Misha Koza. Good afternoon.